Good morning. I am 5 minutes earlier today. As always, if you're watching in recording, you're welcome to fast forward or stay with us through our hellos. Good morning, Sandra. Good morning, Gina. Good morning, Judy. All right, it is time for us to start, and we continue exploring the mindful self-compassion as taught by Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer. Today we will look at the common misgivings around self-compassion, the blocks that prevent us from engaging wholeheartedly in this practice. A misgiving is a worry that self-compassion could have unintended negative consequences. For example, many people mistake self-compassion for self-pity or think that self-compassion is weak and selfish. So we'll look at these common concerns one by one. And as I go through them, just connect with your body, connect with your breath, and notice how each of these misconceptions land with you, and do you have any concerns around that, and am I addressing them or not? And of course, if you have any questions or any concerns about practicing self-compassion that I'm not going to address today, please write to me or put it in the comments, and we're going to discuss them in a different live. So right now, let's just kind of center before I start going into each concern. Take a comfortable position, center, find your breath, maybe scan your body, whatever it is you need to do to settle in this moment, right here, right now. Let things be as they are. Let yourself be as you are. No need to change anything. Just observing what's going on now and what's going on in each moment. Probably the most common misconception is that self-compassion is selfish. Many people assume that spending time and energy being kind and caring toward themselves automatically means that they must be neglecting everybody else. But is it really so? Think of the times when you've been lost in the throes of self-criticism. In those moments, are you self-focused or other-focused? Do you have more or fewer resources to give? Most people find that when they are absorbed in self-judgment, they actually have little bandwidth left to think about anything other than their inadequate, worthless selves. Unfortunately, the ideal of being modest and caring for the welfare of others often comes with a tendency to treat ourselves badly. The irony is that being good to yourself actually gives you the emotional resources to be good to others, while being harsh with yourself only gets in the way. For example, research shows that self-compassionate people are rated by their partners as being more caring and giving in their relationships. And this makes total sense. If I'm cold toward myself and rely on my partner to meet all my emotional needs, I'm surely going to behave badly when those needs are not met. But if I'm able to give myself care and support and to meet many of my own needs directly, I'll have more emotional resources available to give to my partner. So take a couple of breaths in and out and just see if this misconception lives in you as well. And if we were able to address it now. And again, if there is still a concern after the practice, write to me or put it in the comments. I will talk more about it. Another common misconception about self-compassion is that it means feeling sorry for yourself, that it's just a dressed up form of self-pity. But actually, self-compassion is the opposite of self-pity. You can even say it's an antidote for self-pity and the tendency to complain about bad luck. Self-compassion makes us more willing to experience, acknowledge, and accept difficult feelings with kindness. And that helps us digest what happens to us and move on instead of getting swallowed by self-pitying thoughts about how bad things are. And that is one of the reasons self-compassionate people have better mental health. Whereas self-pity emphasizes egocentric feelings of separation and exaggerates the extent of personal distress. Self-compassion allows us to connect our own suffering to the suffering of others. And on top of this, the recognition of our common humanity helps put our own situations into perspective, which doesn't mean denying the validity of our suffering, of course. But when we consider the bigger picture, our problems may seem not as bad as we think. So again, take a deep breath in and out. Just notice if this misconception is something you think about compassion, and if it has been addressed right now. Notice how it lands. Notice if anything changed in how you're feeling in this moment. Another big misconception many people have is that self-compassion is weak or cowardly, or at least passive. In this case, feelings of compassion are confused with quote unquote being nice all the time. However, as we already learned, self-compassion in its yang, masculine form can be quite fierce, taking a strong and resolute stand against anything that causes harm. So instead of being a weakness, self-compassion is an important source of coping and resilience for us. When we go through major life crises, such as divorce, illness, trauma, self-compassion makes all the difference in our ability to survive and even thrive in the face of adversity. It's not really about what we face in life, but how we relate to ourselves when we are going through tough times. What determines our ability to get through those tough times successfully is whether we become our own ally or enemy. Yet another common misgiving about self-compassion is that it will lead to self-indulgence. Here we confuse giving ourselves what we need with giving ourselves what we want. Self-indulgence involves giving ourselves short-term pleasure at the cost of long-term harm. Self-compassion, however, always has its eye on the prize, which is the alleviation of suffering. So a compassionate mother wouldn't give her daughter whatever she wants, like endless bowls of ice cream or letting her skip school whenever she wanted, right? That would be indulgent. Instead, a compassionate mother tells her child to focus on what she needs, doing her homework, eating her vegetables, etc. In the same way, self-compassion is not at all about indulgence. It's about our long-term health, our long-term well-being, which often requires delayed gratification. Also, many people doubt the value of self-compassion by asking, but don't we need to be critical of ourselves sometimes? In this case, there is confusion between harsh self-judgment and constructive criticism. Self-compassion lets go of belittling, demeaning self-judgments as such as I'm a lazy, good-for-nothing loser. When we care about ourselves, we will constructively point out ways we could do things better. This constructive criticism is always aimed at concrete behaviors and does not involve global self-evaluation. For instance, a self-compassionate inner voice might say, the fact that you haven't been to the gym in 6 months has made you feel tired and unhealthy. Maybe you should make a change. And this is a more constructive form of feedback than saying to yourself, you are a lazy slob. Often the tone of our message to ourselves determines whether a critique is constructive or destructive. So yes, of course, we need constructive criticism in our life, which self-compassion provides. And we definitely do not need to be very harsh and belittling to ourselves. And finally, there is a common worry that self-compassion is just a form of making excuses for ourselves, and eventually it will undermine our motivation to improve. And it's quite interesting because we're so deeply attached to our self-criticism that at some level we think that the pain we give ourselves is actually helpful. And yes, self-criticism does work as a motivator to a certain extent, but only because we're driven by the desire to avoid self-judgment when we fail. I mean, if we know that we fail, and if we know that failure will be met with a barrage of self-criticism, it can be too frightening even to try to do anything. This is why self-criticism is associated with underachievement and self-handicapping strategies like procrastination or shaming ourselves into action. On the other hand, with self-compassion, we strive to achieve for a very different reason. We do it because we care. You might say that the motivation behind self-compassion is love, whereas the motivation behind self-criticism is fear. If we truly care about ourselves, we'll do things to make ourselves happy, such as taking on challenging new projects or learning new skills. And because self-compassion gives us the safety we need to acknowledge our weaknesses, we'll be in a much better position to change them for the better if we decide to do so. So let's do a short self-compassion break practice right now to kind of sum it all up. Once again, take a comfortable position and resettle into your body, into your breath. And I invite you to think about a situation in your life that is difficult for you right now. What is it about? Who's involved? What words are you saying to yourself, or how are you feeling in your body when you recall the situation? And now bring mindful awareness to the fact that this situation presents a certain challenge for you. You can
Mm.
repeat after me, this is a moment of suffering for me. or you can choose some other verbiage that resonates better for you today. This is a moment of suffering, or whatever your phrase is. Next step is to remind yourself of our shared humanity. Suffering is a part of life, or some other language that resonates now. Again, repeat these words a few times as you connect with your experience. Suffering is a part of life, or whatever your phrase is. And finally, tap into your inner kindness. May I be kind to myself in this moment. Again, if you want to say different words here to support opening your heart up, that's fine. Repeat the phrase a few times. May I be kind to myself in this moment, or whatever your phrase is. And now scan your body again and notice how you're feeling right now. Allow any sensations to be just as they are. Allow yourself to be just as you are in this moment, right here, right now. As you go through your day today, I invite you to take these short self-compassion breaks as often as you need, and keep reminding yourself that self-compassion is not selfish. On the contrary, it gives us more bandwidth to care for others. Self-compassion is not a form of self-pity. In fact, it is an antidote for self-pity. It makes us more willing to experience, acknowledge, and accept difficult feelings with kindness. Self-compassion is not weak. Quite the opposite, it gives us more resilience when we are faced with difficulty. Self-compassion is not self-indulgent because it emphasizes long-term well-being over short-term pleasure. And finally, self-compassion is not a form of making excuses, and it does not kill our motivation. On the contrary, self-compassion creates the inner safety that is needed to try new things, admit failures and mistakes without destructive self-blame, and course correct with love and care. So practice as much self-compassion today as you need. Enjoy your experience, enjoy your explorations. And I thank you very much for being here today. Have a gorgeous day. I'll see you tomorrow.